Mahoney's at 60 direct sales. Volkswagen need to speed up. After our servicing, JLR classic parts. Mercedes-Benz EVs not selling in the US. Volta gone bust. BMW bikes not for sale. My name's Paul Callan and welcome to this week's MotorZen News. Slightly different start to the show this week. Dennis Mahon, Toyota, are celebrating 60 years in business. Started out in 1963. Also in 1963, Dennis Mahon captained the Dubs that year as well. In 1966, they started car leasing, which was very advanced for the time. They were ahead of everybody else getting into leasing. Tim Mahon was the guy that headed up the leasing. And I always assumed down through the years that Toyota was first imported into Ireland by the Mahonys, but I discovered in this book here, Motor Assembly in Ireland by Bob Montgomery, a fascinating book. Features every single make of vehicle that was ever assembled in Ireland. Brilliant. But the reason that this is coincidental or fits in with me is that 40 years ago this year I started serving my time with Mahon's Toyota in Dundalk as an apprentice mechanic. But the part of this book that's so interesting was that Tim was heading up the leasing division and he had to do all the costings, all the servicing costings, and the costings he was working on vehicles, the costings were Chrysler, Ford, Volkswagen and Fiat. On contract leasing, when they calculated the figure for what the servicing cost would be, but when they started to look at lease Toyotas, they began to discover that the costs were really low, and they regard that as a light bulb moment, because at the same time Flaherty's, who were the first importers of Toyota, were looking at selling it. They weren't bothered with pushing on with it, and at that point Tim came forward with this information to Dennis and they pushed forward and they became the importers for Toyota from 1973. So a really interesting story, all linked in, and also then links in with me starting my career with Toyota 40 years ago. So we'll get back to the normal show. Direct sales versus agent, direct sales stroke agent sales versus dealership. There's a lot of controversy and a lot of trying this out and a lot of changing and a lot of going with it and a lot of not going with it. Direct sales to the customer is not for everybody. That's what's been discovered now, because some of the brands have gone out there with it and they're discovering it's not just suiting everybody. Citroen will be the first of the Stellantis brands that will go direct selling from next year. Xpeng, is the Chinese brand, is phasing out direct selling and is opening dealerships in China. BMW will go to the market with direct selling and traditional dealerships. In 2024 they're going to do it with Mini, and in 2026 it's going to be BMW, and also BMW and Mini are going to use the same model, the fixed pricing on its used vehicles as well, so that's going to be interesting. And NIO, the German or the Chinese brand, is also saying it's going to roll out a dealer network throughout Europe. So all sorts of different approaches to how they're going to sell cars, and for something that's been so constant for so long, it's interesting to watch. But for me personally, I assume that it's the younger people are going to want the direct selling model, and people who have traditionally dealt with the dealerships are going to want to continue to traditionally deal with a dealership. Chief designer with Porsche and Volkswagen has come out this week and said that because the Chinese and Tesla can do things completely differently, it has forced the German manufacturers and automakers to be more open-minded. And he says ultimately that's a good thing, but that in order to catch the Chinese and to catch Tesla, they need to start to move a lot faster. It's an interesting statement, because I think what it says is that the traditional car makers are in trouble. They're not reacting fast enough. They're not taking the threat of Tesla and the Chinese enough. But it's not quite clear in what he's saying. Obviously, he can't come out and be that direct, but I think that's the gist of what he's saying in it. A survey in the UK trade industry has surveyed 100 dealers, 100 of the bigger dealers in the UK, and the survey was to do with after-hours service to the customers, key drop-off and key collections. 56% of the 100 dealerships close at 6 o'clock in the evening, 28% close at 5:30. 26% of motorists said that they would like to be able to handle the service interaction much more online. and at a time that's more convenient to them. For the interesting statistic from this one is that it features also Northern Ireland dealers, and in Yorkshire, for example, 47% of the people surveyed would like to have more after-hours servicing, but in Northern Ireland it was only 25%. So it's interesting that maybe there is that big difference between the UK market and the Northern Ireland market, but that's an interesting difference, 47 to 25, that's clearly shown in that survey. Jaguar Land Rover is going to make it easier for owners of classic cars to get parts. They're setting up an eBay store. It's going to have authentic OEM parts for models out of production for 10 years or more. They reckon at this point in time they've already got 5,000 part numbers. They're going to be recreations of original parts using the original drawings, and in some cases being produced by the original suppliers. This is an interesting area. A couple of months ago, we featured also that Porsche was going to recreate engine blocks from original drawings. So more and more we're seeing the manufacturers starting to get into the area of the classic vehicle. So for years they didn't bother with it, they didn't see it have any value, but they seem to be honing in on it now. Some of you out there might say it suits them better to get parts for the current range in rather than focusing on classics. The European market of diesel sales has hit the lowest point ever. It's a new low. It's 14.2% of the market is diesel now. Last September there was 150,000 diesels sold in Europe. That's a fall of 6%. Interestingly, Germany and Italy had an increase in diesel sales, but France had a massive reduction, down to 13,000 less units sold in France than there was last year. So the diesel market, again, 14.2%, constantly dropping. Mercedes-Benz electric vehicles are having problems in the United States. Not problems with the vehicles, but problems that they're not selling. They have had a fourfold increase in the market. The EVs currently make up 14% of Mercedes sales in America, but something's after happening in the last couple of months. In September, the number of days it was taking to sell a Mercedes EV was 82. The number of days it was taking to sell a BMW EV was 38. Now, reading between the lines on this, it looks a little bit like that they're not putting on sales programs, which I think means discounts and incentives to encourage people to buy them. The Mercedes are not doing that, and other brands are. Sweden, Volta Truck, a startup electric truck builder, started in 2019, has gone out of business. The UK operation has also gone. They had a UK factory, so both the Swedish factory and the UK factory are gone. They were making small electric truck. Kind of the problem started back in August when their battery supplier, Proterra, it went out of business, and what happened was then that they couldn't get sufficient number of batteries to meet the supply requirements, and now they're not getting the financial support they need because they're not hitting the numbers on delivering. So kind of a house of cards there once the battery supplier went out of business. But we're seeing more of this now, you know, as interest rates rise and reality comes into some of these companies. They're not making sense. In America, BMW Motorrad has stopped the sales of all internal combustion motorcycles, new and used. It's not quite clear what's going on here, but right now they're saying we're not selling any internal combustion motorcycles. They are continuing to sell their electric motorcycle, the CEO4. As far as what the problem is concerned, they haven't completely come out and said what's wrong. They have said that there's a problem with the fuel system, but they have also said that it's safe to continue to ride the bikes that are existing out there in the market. So that's all the information they've given. So at this point, the only thing we can surmise is that they've got something wrong with the emissions on these internal combustion motorcycles. They're saying it's fuel system, but yet not it's safe to ride. So, but yet no, they're stopping sales of all internal combustion motorcycles in America. So we'll try and bring you more news on that when we get it, to find out exactly what's going on. But all motorcycle sales have stopped except for the electric. That's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Good constant following on LinkedIn now, and we appreciate if you could give us the thumbs up. It's really encouraging to know that people are genuinely liking what we're doing. So as much thumbs up as we could get would be great. And if you know anybody else in the trade you might get share a show with them and try and get them on board as well. Thanks for that. See you next week. Bye.